So many times we are gardening and homesteading and we get a glut of tomatoes and we feel like we have to have a massive amount so that we can do a canner load of canned tomatoes or freeze them up. Sometimes we forget the most obvious and simplest way to preserve our tomatoes, and that is by drying them. There are several ways that we can dry them. Of course, the most traditional and easiest way is sun drying them, lying them on sheets. Obviously, I have dehydrator sheets here, but something like this works really well if you're going to sun dry them or do them in your dehydrator. You can also use your car or van or whatever vehicle you have, because that makes such a hot place, and it's actually probably a little bit better to do it in a closed space like that because you will not have the issue of bugs. Although technically they probably wouldn't be called sun-dried tomato, they would be called car-dried tomato. So today, I'm not going to sun-dry mine, although that's a wonderful way to do it. I'd prefer to do mine in a more controlled environment and put mine in our Excalibur Dehydrator. So I don't have a lot, and I have like a variety of different kinds of tomatoes. I have some Romas, and then some, I don't know if these are early girls or what they are. And I actually need to go out and check in my garden and see if I have any more. But for now, I'm going to get these started, and I really like to have dried tomatoes. There was one year that we dried so many different colors and flavors, and we had jars and jars, and we could use them for so many different ways. So if you're kind of stumped on what you can use sun-dried tomatoes for or dehydrator dried tomatoes for, let me give you a few suggestions. My top favorites to do with dried tomatoes are, my very top favorite thing to do is to put them on pizza. Now these are some dried tomatoes that we made actually a couple years ago. As you can see, they're pretty dark. They almost turn black. But I can smell them. The aroma is still very strong. So these are, it's more like tomato leather. If you dry them properly, you'll have many uses for your dried tomatoes. So I like to place these around. They almost look like little pepperonis. I don't eat pepperoni, but I don't think you're gonna fool anybody, but you can put them around on your pizza. They'll be decorative, and then when you bite into them, it'll be a burst of summer right out of your garden. So I highly recommend doing up tomatoes, and you can do them in small batches or large batches. I actually have a dehydrator load going right now with some sliced oranges, and so I'm going to add a couple trays, whatever I have, into my dehydrator so I don't have to use additional electricity. But if you want to go with the off-grid route or the low power route, I do recommend putting them on trays, putting them out in the sun, maybe with a fan going to keep the bugs off. It's better if we don't have bugs in our food, but as long as you have a continuous breeze, the bugs probably will leave them alone, and they can dry nicely, and they do have a wonderful flavor when you dry them in the sun. In addition to pizza, which I love for the dried tomatoes, my favorite uses for the dried tomatoes include flavored dipping oils. You can take olive oil and spices like your Italian seasonings or fresh or dried herbs and infuse them in that oil. Get a good quality olive oil, put them in a jar or a little bowl, and let them infuse for several hours or overnight, and you will have a wonderful dipping oil for your hard, crusty breads. It's just really, really tasty. Another thing we can do is add them to our breads. Chop them up fine or leave them in your slices and use them in your rustic breads with herbs or olives, sun-dried tomatoes. It's really quite a nice flavor to add to your breads. Really adds well to sourdough breads. Pasta is another thing that I love to add sun-dried tomatoes to. You can add it to your sauce and let it simmer, and the tomatoes will get softer. They will stay a little bit chewy, and you will have the peelings to deal with. We don't really mind that, but if you do, then you might want to do something different. You can just eat these straight out of the jar. You can use them for snacking. When our kids were little, they did that a lot, and sometimes we would make these and sprinkle some nutritional yeast flakes, a little bit of good salt, and some herbs on them, and it makes a wonderful snack. It's like you're eating a little bitty pizza, but it's just tomatoes and herbs. So that's a really nice way to do it. Salads. Dried tomatoes go really well in salads, especially like your Italian pasta salad. Olives, cucumbers, tomatoes, sun-dried tomatoes, and fresh herbs really make a nice salad. You can reconstitute these dried tomatoes with water, and you can use them for things that you would normally use tomatoes for. They're going to have a little bit of a different texture, and they're going to be more concentrated. So think about how it would taste if you were using like a tomato paste, because they are that concentrated. I also like to just reconstitute these, if you will, with oil, with olive oil, and use them in recipes. It's not the same as water, but it will infuse that oil with a nice flavor, and then you can use it for more things than just dipping. One other idea with your dried tomatoes or any of your dried vegetables that I have seen but not done yet, which I thought was a fabulous idea: dry these until they're good and crisp, until they're crunchy, and then throw them in your blender and blend them into a fine powder. And then you can imagine that a whole bunch of tomatoes can make a jar of sliced tomatoes dried. Well, then when you take that, you can shrink it down to just something very small. It's a super concentrated food, and you can add it to smoothies, you can add it to sauces. You have like a very small package with a mighty big punch. So that's another thing that I'm thinking about doing if I have a surplus of tomatoes. Right now I don't have a surplus, so I'm just doing the ones that I have. I would love to know, what are your favorite ways to use dried tomatoes? I'm sure I've missed some. Leave it in the comments which ones I've missed and what your favorites are. Meanwhile, let me get to slicing these, because there's no time like the present. Just slice these about 1/4 of an inch thick and arrange them on your trays. If you have any bad spots, just make sure that they're not affecting the whole thing. This can get a little bit messy, so it's probably better that you have a towel or paper towel under your tray. I did not do that, and so I am probably going to have a mess on my counter. Just arrange them. There's a little bit of space between, but they're going to shrink as they dry, so you don't have to add a lot of space. The juicier your tomatoes, the longer it's going to take for them to dry. These Roma tomatoes will dry in a faster amount of time than my juicy ones. We have the Excalibur Dehydrator. We've had it for many years. Ours holds up to 9 trays. You can do as many or as few, from 1 to 9. So that's kind of handy. If you're going to be dehydrating things, you might as well max it out, because then you're using your electricity in a more efficient way. And we don't actually dehydrate a lot of things just because of the electricity usage. So that's why I'm doing these today, because I already had a project going on. Otherwise, it can take up to 18 hours to dehydrate some things. So I don't always want to have that energy consumption. We are off grid. We don't always have the abundance of power. It just depends if we have sunny days or cloudy days. Lots of factors to consider. Of course, if you're slicing tomatoes, it's really helpful to have a good serrated knife. My favorite happens to be the tomato knife from Rada. I get them generally at our Mennonite store, which is 15 minutes from us, but you can order them on Amazon and different places. I will put the link in the description, but we usually just get them locally. This slices any tomato. I really love this knife. It is my favorite knife. Okay, once you get your tomatoes all sliced and filling up your tray, then pop it in the dehydrator, and you'll have to just pay attention to how long it takes, because it will be individual, I think, for your area, how much humidity is in the air. I am running it right now on a fruit setting. I like to do these until they're a little bit beyond the leathery stage, just to make sure that they're dried really well. And yeah, then store them in mason jars. You can vacuum seal them with your mason jar vacuum sealer, which I also sometimes use. That's what I plan to do. I'm going to store them in my mason jars, but then I'm going to vacuum seal them so that they will last all the longer. Okay, because it is the next day, we have the opportunity to check out our tomatoes and things which have been going for they have not been going for 24 hours. I let them run for probably about 6 hours, turn them off during the night because our solar goes, we don't want to drain our solar too much during the night until we kind of get the system optimal. But then I turned them back on this morning, and I ended up doing a lot of cherry tomatoes, and they shrunk down to this, but they are done. They are not quite crunchy. These aren't quite crunchy, but do you see how red these are? So these are ideal for the colors. And those other ones, I think it's just because they've been stored for so long why they turned so dark. Or maybe they were just a dark tomato. I don't remember. So here's a bunch of cherries. And some of the other ones that we did, remember this tray was full and now there's lots of space between them. So when you do this, go ahead and cram them end to end, because when you're done, it'll look like you hardly did anything, but it's a good way to do it. It's sometimes just don't get discouraged about it because they will shrink up and be kind of small when you're finished. Let's take one of these off the tray and we'll just take a look at it. I really like these trays. They're pretty much non-stick, mostly non-stick. Okay, kind of non-stick, maybe non-stick. Okay, so this one is like leather. It's a heart. You see it? They're at the leathery stage. You can put them away as long as there's not any stickiness. If there's any stickiness at all, especially in your cherry type ones, I would give them a few more hours to make sure they're good and dry. What you do not want, actually, here's one that seems like it needs a little bit more processing because the edge of it is still a little bit moist. And do you see how I can squeeze it out of there? Yeah. This needs a little bit more processing, so I'm going to go ahead and put them all back in just for good measure. It's not going to hurt anything. Might as well have them completely dried. Now we do store our dehydrator. We do store our dehydrator out in our sunroom where it can heat up and the plants will love it, but it doesn't necessarily heat up the house because it will put out some heat. Just keep that in mind. You stay safe, be well, enjoy the produce of your garden. I hope you're getting a lot. But either way, be well, stay safe, and may God bless you.